The following research paper examines incidental language learning. Based on previous research about language acquisition, researchers aim to investigate incidental learning and performance among children and adult language acquisition. They came up with the hypothesis that two potential factors that may influence the learning of complex patterns were 1. Implicit learning, which is the unconscious and unintentional acquisition of abstract information, and 2. The frequency of events present in the given environment. The first experiment consisted of two groups, Group 1 being 12 undergraduates at the University of Rochester, whom were selected from the list of students enrolled in the Introduction to Psychology course, and Group 2 being 13 6 to 7-year-old children from a local elementary school. Participants were exposed to a 21-minute audio tape of 300 tokens of 6 trisyllabic nonsense words that were then paired with 6 real words, creating a total of 36 possible combinations. However, their task was not primarily focused on this one audio. Instead, they were instructed to work on an illustration using KidPix2, which is basically a coloring program for children, while this audio played in the background. The participants were under the impression that this was an auditory creativity task and were not given any cues to word boundaries. The only information they had access to were transitional probabilities, which were higher within words than across word boundaries. After exposure to the sounds, participants were then dictated 2 sets of sounds and then asked to determine which set sounded more like the one in the background tape. Results showed a mean score of 21.1 among adults, which is significantly above chance, and a mean score of 21.3 among children, also significantly above chance. It's important to also note that the minor difference in scores between adults and children showed no statistical significance. So yes, not only does evidence show that implicit learning does play a role in incidental learning, it displays the same effects among both children and adults equally. But does frequency of exposure affect these results, perhaps increase or decrease effectiveness? Researchers conducted a second experiment to test this hypothesis. Quite similar to the first experiment, they used 12 students from the University of Rochester who happened to be on campus, and 11 6 to 7-year-old children who attended summer camp on campus. The same experiment was executed, only this time the participants were exposed to the audio tape twice. So during the first session, they were asked to complete the same task, which was working on an illustration while the tape played in the background. However, it was not until the second session that they were tested on whether set 1 or set 2 most similarly reflected the sounds in the tape. All other factors stayed the same, so they were still unaware that it was an actual language and still unaware that they were going to be tested on how well they could memorize the sounds. Results from this experiment showed a mean score of 26.3 out of the 36 choices among adults and a mean score of 24.6 among children. Both results were significantly better than chance, indicating that frequency of exposure in the environment was beneficial for both groups. So, to answer the hypothesis, given the results of the two experiments, implicit learning and longer exposure both contributed equally to incidental learning among both groups. It demonstrated the ability to learn basic and early aspects of language acquisition, regardless of age. Considering the fact that the audio containing an actual language was not the primary focal point, yet students were still able to memorize the patterns, proved that the structure of a novel language could be learned without any instructions or external motivation to learn. Lastly, it illustrated how computation of merely transitional probabilities can occur incidentally, all leaving room for future experiments to further investigate, perhaps, whether this may be the case for only certain aspects of language acquisition or if it solely applies to incidental learning of structure. For example, although this may be the case for incidental learning of sound patterns, the same cannot be said about learning word order.